Hello! Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. For this episode, we got to hang out with Nadya from Pussy Riot. She is an absolutely brilliant artist, and everything she touches is utterly magical. I'm quite the fan, and I hope that you enjoy our interview. Nadya, welcome to Why Not Both, and I'm immediately curious why you were talking to Stoya, because she's amazing.
Oh, well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I just jumped off our live stream with Stoya, and I'm in the middle of many releases of new music and videos from Pussy Riot, and I'm pairing every music video release with a conversation with a person who is interesting to me, and I think that they can say something delightful and exciting about the topic that we're discussing in the video or in the song, right? So, for example, when we released a track, "Toxic," that Dorian Electra features on, we spoke with Dorian Electra. We had this YouTube stream. Mm-hmm. And yesterday we released Sexist video and audio, the track. And I mean, surprisingly, it is about sexism. It is about, rape culture and consent, and importance of consent, importance of boundaries. So all of that, I was looking for a person with who I can discuss it. And I got to know Stoya a few months ago because we participated in the same book, Women's Right to Pleasure. And she was curating this conversation with me and Alice Bagg about our contribution to the book and just, our activism and feminism in general. And she was like such a brilliant host of that conversation. I totally fell in love with her as a conversation partner, and so yeah, she just naturally came to my mind, and we just spoke about ethical porn, about queer porn, about female directors of porn, and OnlyFans. How does it change the industry? And the important, she really loves OnlyFans. So if you listen to this podcast and interested in Stoya, go subscribe to Stoya's OnlyFans. Yeah. She says it's really, liberating because it puts creative control in the hands of the creators.
Oh my God, I just got so excited. I was like, one, I'm going to subscribe to Stoya's OnlyFans because I was literally saying to a friend yesterday that I miss seeing more of her content because I always really appreciated Stoya's particular take on pornography. Like, I love that she's like, yeah, let's decentralize the male gaze and also make this enjoyable and exploratory and all the things that like I find interesting about it. And I was just saying, I was like, gosh, I haven't seen anything from Stoya lately. And now I know it's because I need to subscribe to her OnlyFans. I was like, you solved the riddle for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I feel like during pandemic times, it's actually much easier and safer for creators to make content like on their own, or with like roommates, or like with person like who they're I don't know, they're close with, right? So they don't have to go to sets, they don't have to be involved in big production because it's not safe right now because of COVID. And I feel like 2020 and 2021, like until everyone will be vaccinated, OnlyFans will be the king of the game, the queen of the game, and later hopefully too, because from what I understood from Stoya's take on it, I got really excited about OnlyFans and what it does for the pornography industry. Because she was also talking about how it makes porn more diverse, and so you can see bigger diversity of bodies, because actually even big studios, they see success of people with different body types, with different skin color and abilities, and they see that these performers are doing well. So just from economical perspective, they would want to include them more in mainstream porn.
Yeah, and in that way they're not tokenized. Like, spoiler alert, I'm a therapist when I'm not podcasting and music making, and I work with a nonprofit called Pineapple that provides basically they provide subsidized mental health care for people in the sex work industry. And so a lot of my clients are in the sex work industry. I have several associates who work with people in the industry as well, because it's a really underserved population. So I was like, okay, how do I help out? And talking to my clients within the industry, it's been fascinating learning more about OnlyFans and about content creation in general, because it used to be that people that were outside of like a certain very narrow genre of person, like you might be like tokenized in mainstream porn, where it's like you might have one or two releases that are based around this one niche interest, as opposed to just accepting that people actually are interested in more than just one genre. People want to see themselves reflected. People want to see diversity reflected. And so when people started creating on OnlyFans, there's proof there now where you can say, well, see, like how popular people want to see this. Whereas people were fighting before, being like, you shouldn't just have like one release, or like say, oh, it's a different, only a few people are going to want that, we're not going to advertise for that. That it's like, no, people want everything. People are interested in so many things.
Absolutely.
Oh, that is so cool. And you mentioned the other person that was in the talk. You said, did you speak to Alice Bagg, you said?
Yeah, we spoke with Alice Bagg around 2 months ago. It was a podcast hosted by Black Book Media, and like in collaboration with Stoya, and we spoke about a women's right to pleasure book that we all of us participated in.
Oh my gosh, now I have to check that out, because she was actually one of my favorite guests I've ever had on this podcast. Like, she was just like so kind and gentle and ferocious at the same time, and I loved her work ethos. Like, oh, that's
same. It was really incredible conversation, and they're both so articulated and amazing and inspiring.
Oh my gosh. Where can we hear these conversations? Because I love the idea that you had of pairing a conversation with the art that you're releasing, because like it's that whole personal is political, and also your creations are activism. And I was like, oh, that's a genius pairing. Well done. Where do we hear these?
Thank you. Well, it lives on Pussy Riot YouTube channel, and if you type Pussy Riot in search window of YouTube, you will find the channel, and subscribe to it and push on notifications. Like, comment, everything that helps promoting the content will be highly appreciated, because we are independent creators. We're not backed by any corporation, like no labels involved, and so like we're one-to-one with our audience. So we're doing our best to be connected with our audience through social media that are not perfect, but this is the tool that we have these days.
Yes. And especially like I was watching the video for Toxic, and now I'm really curious to watch the interview that you had with Dorian, because like it was to me at least, it was fascinating watching it, because it had all of this like almost like sweet darkness about it, but then like all this jarring imagery, and it really did get across for me as the viewer, like a toxic dynamic, in that there is something that has to be alluring and attractive about it, but it's dark. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
Mhm.
in it if it was all dark. Like if someone just approached you being like, hello, our relationship's going to be terrible. You'd be like, bye. And I thought the video captured that really well. And I guess, like, what has it been like putting something out that is personal in that way? Like, have you had conversations with other listeners about it?
Mhm. Uh, we mean with listeners of the track?
Yeah, yeah, or other people that had had similar experiences, because I think
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, my sister, Palina, who's 20 right now, she told me that she actually found herself in this video, but she never, like, she's a sister from just from another mother, so we were not
Mhm.
we didn't spend our upbringing together,
Mm.
so that's why we're not like so close, but also we're sisters, so like we obviously are in touch as friends. So she didn't never told me that she was in toxic relationships, and I
Wow.
was like, wow, yeah, she just ended them not a while ago. But no, she knew that she could talk with me about this or with her friends, but she didn't because that's the thing about toxic relationships. Like that's the problem. You never can talk with anyone about it.
Yeah.
So my hope with this video was to just I was trying basically to reach people who are still in toxic relationships because I went through them myself, and
Mhm.
that's the reason why I made this video and this song. And I remember clearly that feeling. You feel like you're not seen. There is no one you can talk to because like
Mhm.
everyone is under suspicion, and you are under suspicion. All your thoughts, not just your moves, and not just your actual doings, but like even what you think is under
Mhm.
suspicion. You're like the way you look at people, and that's terrifying. But there is a moment of realization that no, it cannot be like this, and but it takes time to reach this moment. And I was just hoping that somehow I can bring this moment closer to those people who are going through toxic relationships right now.
Yeah, it's that moment where it's like all of a sudden like a switch flips and it's like you can't go back. Like once you realize what it is, it's like you can't
Yeah.
unsee it. It's very, yeah, it's kind of surreal where like, and you're right, especially in abusive dynamics, like you do question your own perceptions and you do question your own thoughts, particularly because those relationships are often so isolating. Um,
Mhm.
and so you're like, did that really happen? Like, was it really that bad? And then like once you actually are on the other side of it, it's almost easier to see. And so I'm glad that you're speaking out about it. And I'm glad you made art about it because I think that people in some ways either brush it under the rug or like romanticize sometimes power dynamics like that. Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
images, at least in
Mhm.
Western pop culture, that like I'll never forget like talking to teenage girls about Twilight. And they're like, I want someone
Mhm.
like that. I was like, oh, you want an abusive stalker? That's what's romanticized in our culture. Oh dear. Okay. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
I think the more we talk about it, the more girls, or not necessarily girls, anyone, they'll be like, they'll see signs of abuse from the very beginning. I'll just not get into those relationships. And I remember, just growing up, this kind of relationships they did romanticize. It's never attractive to me. I don't even know how I ended up in those, but I have a theory that because I identify myself as a strong person, a
Mm-hmm.
strong woman, feminist. I like to put on my shoulders more than I can take.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to feel responsible for other people. And that's part of what makes me an activist. I want to help people. And, people who are abusive, they're often hurt people.
Yes.
Sometimes they struggle with mental health issues. And I'm aware how difficult it is to go through some um, challenging mental health situation. And so you don't want to be, basically, you're just scared to break up with this person because they really can hurt themselves. Like you see that they don't only hurt you, but they're hurting by themselves. And that's challenging, like like you can't really talk with this person. You you have to comfort them. You can't be honest with them, and that's what happened with me. I was trying to help this person, and I was thinking, oh, when he will when he will be better, we
Right.
will have an honest and rational conversation, and I'll ask him not to hurt me. But now I can't, because he's like on the verge of mental breakdown.
Yeah, and you spoke to such an interesting and relevant point that a lot of times people have this narrative that, like, if you're strong, you won't get into this dynamic. But if anything, it's people who are often incredibly strong that do, because of exactly what you said, that they want to help people. They are so strong that they're like, I've taken on my own stuff and I can help other people with theirs. And those are the people that often people who are hurt. And unfortunately, you're right. A lot of people who do act in abusive manners are people that have been hurt before and aren't able to deal with it, and they express that hurt onto others. And they tend to actually gravitate towards people who are quite strong and who are capable of helping others. Like, that's a dynamic I see a lot. And so I think a lot of people feel shame that they're like, why, if I'm so strong and so good at helping others and all of those things, like, why was I in this dynamic? And it's usually precisely because you're empathetic and strong.
Yeah. And I don't have a recipe, honestly. I wish I wish someone had, maybe you, like, what do you, because it was like, I remember myself, like, I was like, what can I do? Because I if I leave him right now, he's going to kill himself, and that's what he told me. Because they blackmail you, in they besides gaslighting and isolating for everyone, they blackmail you. But it's not really, it wasn't even rational blackmailing. I believed what he was saying. Like, I was like, there was a chance that he would kill himself. And what do you do?
Yeah, because then you're like, wait, would then I be responsible? And like, I've talked to so many people who've expressed that they're like, I don't want to be responsible for someone harming themselves. And so if I leave, they'll harm themselves. And it's so hard to untangle, because then you're like, wait, well, where's the boundary? Like, what's my stuff and what's this other person's stuff? And how much am I responsible for? And it takes years usually to kind of like untangle from it.
Yeah, for me to I found myself on the, like, in the worst possible I found myself in deep depression. So I had to reach the absolute bottom to say no to these relationships, because I realized that it hurts me so much. So I'm not able to give like other people. I'm not able to produce art. I'm not even interested in activism anymore, because I'm just struggling to survive. When person is struggling, when your main goal is to survive, it's not about helping others. It's not a situation where you can help others. So I was like, okay, this is like absolutely damaging for my personality, because my personality is my art and my activism.
Yeah.
But the question is, like, can you actually do you absolutely have to reach this bottom? Because I felt like I have to reach this bottom. But I think the trick is, like, if you happen to end up in abusive relationships, how do you you don't necessarily have to reach that bottomless pit to get out of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And having more art about this and having people having frank conversations about this, I think will, like, in a way, like, help people step away from that abyss. Like, when you're like, well, I have to hit the bottom of the well, because that is pretty common, that you're like, well, I have to see where this goes. And usually it goes terribly, dramatically, and for quite a while. But if you're like, oh, what if I don't have to do that? And I think the more representations that people see, and the more people see, like, if you step away from that, you're going to have social support from people around you. There's art about this. There's other people that have your experience. Because I think that when people are kind of staring down into the hole, being like, where does this go? Where am I going to fall? They don't know if other people will support them. Whereas, like, when you create art like this, and when you put it out into the world, they can see, hey, if you step away from that, there's a lot of people over here. Like, you're not alone. there's support. And so
I remember when I was in these relationships, I didn't even know how it's called. Well, it was like a few years ago, and I feel like the whole conversation public, like conversation about toxic relationships went mainstream, at least in Russia, only a few years ago. And when I just started to be in those relationships, I didn't even know. I was thinking it's just my problem. And also, your abuser makes everything to convince you that it is your problem. It is your fault. It's like you're guilty. Yeah, so like later when I started to read more and more about this and see that other people talking, I was like, oh, wow, good to know.
Yeah. Like recently, FK Twigs came out and talked about her relationship with Shia LaBeouf. And I mean, I loved what she said in an interview because someone said to her, they asked her the question, why did you stay? And she said, I'm not going to answer that question. I would rather you ask, why did he do this? And I was like, oh, thank you. Because it's not the fault of someone who is being abused that they stay. Like you said, like there's a lot of reasons why you stay. And mainly it's because you've been coerced into believing that something terrible will happen usually to you or the other person. Or like, why don't we ask, like, why do people abuse people in this way? Like, how do we, in a way, like, though we are obviously addressing the trauma of people who have been abused, how do we stop people from abusing people? Like, that's something I wonder a lot about. Like, because I very infrequently see people in my practice coming in being like, oh, I was horrible to someone and I don't want to be horrible to people anymore. I usually see people coming in that are like actually there because of the actions of someone else. And they're like, how do I mend this trauma that someone else has inflicted? And like, there's a part of me that's like, not that I want to seek out people who have done bad things, but I'm like, if you've done something bad to someone or if you're acting in a way that's abusing people, like, wouldn't you want to learn how to not do that?
Oh, yeah. We had lots of these conversations with my feminist friends in Russia. Some of them are psychotherapists as well, and they have different opinions on if they are ready to work with actors of violence, as we call them. Like we don't like to label to say that, oh, this is an abuser. Like we like to say, oh, this is a person who inflicted abuse. So like he doesn't or she doesn't have to live with this label till the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And some of my friends say like, yeah, I want to establish this like special service or master class, whatever, like maybe free help to people who admit that they inflict harm to others and they're ready to work with it. And some of my feminist friends, they're just like, fuck it, like I don't this is too difficult for me, because it's a lot of work, and like it's a lot of they're self-defensive in so many ways. So I honestly respect both opinions, because it's utterly it's about self care of each psychotherapist, right? If you choose to work with people who are abusive, or you say no, this can be damaging to me as well.
Oh yeah, like there are people that work with in the US it's like mandated therapy, like people who are court mandated to see therapists because of either violence they've inflicted or a crime they've committed, and there are therapists that choose to work in that field. However, I do sometimes wonder about that dynamic, because if you're forced to go into therapy, I haven't experienced having a client that's been forced to go into therapy. I'm wondering, like, does that affect your willingness to change as opposed to if you voluntarily go into it?
Of course.
Yeah. like if someone tells you, it's almost like when you're a kid and someone's like, you have to take the class, you're like, great. Whereas if you're like, oh, this is a really negative pattern, and I completely agree. Like there are clients that I, for my own sake, like probably would not prefer to work with because there would be too much transference of emotion on my part. Like it wouldn't be good work because it would be too difficult for me to keep my own emotions out of it. And in a way, I like to use my own emotions positively in therapy, as opposed to me feeling like defensive or like I'm in danger, things like that. Like that wouldn't be productive.
Yeah, obviously. Actually, I've just started to think right now about Clan Sopranos, right? And I was thinking that actually, you know, the client acting out in the psychiatrist's office, in psychotherapist's office, was romanticized there. And I've been liking that theory, but now as I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, yeah, the guy was a douche to his psychotherapist, and everyone is like celebrating him for this. So I was like, nah.
Oh my God. I was like, oh God, don't get me started on like pop culture depictions of psychotherapy. I'm always like, oh, this is a nightmare. Like the one show that I've got to say that I loved. Have you watched the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend?
No, I didn't. Should I?
Oh my gosh, I love that show. And it is one of the only, like, it's so funny because the whole show is based around like that trope that like people say, oh, she's my crazy ex-girlfriend, to discount like any personal responsibility. And that's what the show is a joke on, is that it's like that we should of course never call women that. But it's a study about this one character, and it's her journey as she moves across the country, kind of spur of the moment, because she runs into an ex of hers, and just it's her adventures that follow that. I don't want to spoil it, but the depictions of mental health in that show are so spot on. Like none of the therapists do things that are like sketchy and weird. Like none of their client interactions are inappropriate. Like none of it is scandalized. Like especially the way they talk about certain diagnoses is like so wonderful and normalized. And it just follows these characters as like different things happen and different mental health stuff comes up, but it's not one of those like, oh no, for a serious talk on mental health.
I'm gonna watch it. Thank you for the recommendation.
It also features lots of really, really hilarious musical numbers. So like I'm a big fan.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Yay. It very much fits into, I mean, I started this podcast based on the idea of like people who do multiple things that all kind of dovetail together. So of course I love that show. Oh my goodness. How did you end up meeting Dorian Electra? I'd seen them on Instagram forever and just love everything they do. They are powerful.
I met them in 2019 in Chicago. Don't even ask me what I was doing in Chicago. I just ended up in Chicago, and Dorian Electra ended up in Chicago as well. And we the thing that connected us was clitoris, because someone was making a documentary about clitoris, and I think the producers of the show, they connected us. They were like, yeah, it seems like you guys will like each other. So we connected because of clitoris.
It's a good connection.
I know. And we are best friends ever since.
Oh, that's such a good origin story.
I know.
Oh, that's so funny. It's like, so then this person was like, okay, so clitoris, you two go.
I mean, literally. And then we toured together. We performed in a lot of American cities together, and in Paris as well. Dorian is the best community organizer ever seen in my life. I learned so much from them about importance of collaboration, collective creation of piece of art, because and we talked on at our talk with Dorian that came out a week ago about this idea of creative genius that prevents so many creative people from collaborating and actually getting fully enjoying collaborating. And I always knew that, but it's like one thing to know and another thing learn with your experience and see how it works for other people, because I'm coming from the art movement, so I know about collaboration, and the importance of it, but seeing Dorian making it with such joy, because for me it was like 10 years ago, sometimes I would feel like, oh, they're changing lyrics of my song, like how dare they? This is my genius input, like how they. they're
It's
assholes.
mine.
Like, and I would be like, smiling and be like, yeah, sure, you can change them. Like, but inside me, I was just like furious, like, it's not the case anymore. I just got over it, but it took me a while. And now, like, I'm glad that I can talk about these negative emotions that I used to experience sometimes when I would collaborate. And Dorian was one of those people who actually showed me like real, true joy of collaboration. So now I'm like, if I don't like people to change something, I'm just like being upfront. But I mean, I'm basically, I'm not keeping anything for myself. I would be like, I'm not comfortable with you changing these lyrics because it's really important for me. I'm learning as I'm growing about importance of setting boundaries, about talking what you think about. Don't never keep bad emotions for yourself because it will hurt you in the end of the story and your relationships with people. So yeah, thanks Dorian, because they were one of my gurus on this path, and they say the same thing about me. So it feels like it's mutual.
Oh, I'm like, now I want to interview Dorian.
Oh, you should.
I was like, they sound great. And yeah, like what you said struck me where it's like, it sounds like now you feel more secure with the people too that you're collaborating with, because it's hard sometimes to be honest when you're like, yes, I want to keep this versus, nah, no, it's cool. I like your idea on that. And that's kind of the key to collaboration, is feeling secure enough to know like which parts of this are you like, yeah, that part I would be cool with altering, and which parts you're like,
Yeah.
And sometimes those parts are best saved for like your own songs. Like at least when I'm collaborating with people, it's like if there's something that I really, really am very attached to, I'm like, maybe this is actually just like a me song, this bit.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we'll just keep that out of it. That's maybe an idea for like a me thing later. Let's like address other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to know that you can put things in different boxes, because as a young creator, when I was 20, I was treating every piece of art that I'm creating with my collaborators as the last one. Literally, I was thinking like I have to put like all my thoughts, like this is so important. If it's not gonna be said in this song or in this video, it's fucking end of the world. It will never be said again. And so I would argue, and now like absolutely, as you just said, like if this thought is not going to appear in this song, this is not the end of the world. Like, guess what? Tomorrow you can write another song. There.
Just put it over there, like just Frankenstein songs together. It's fine. Oh gosh. When you were talking about Dorian, just imagine like a song that was made of like all these like random bits of songs. And in a way, that's actually what I like about Dylan Brady's production. Like that pinged in my brain too, that I was like, huh, that actually matches his ethos on that. Yeah.
Well, if you will take a look at English translation of lyrics of early Pussy Riot songs, 2011, 2012, this is that, because sometimes 10 people would participate in creating lyrics of the song that has 3 verses and 1 chorus, and oh Jesus Christ.
You're like, it's like a collage. It's a collage of ideas.
Yeah. It's like, like that game when you just when you fold the paper and answer each of you answers the question about the story.
Yes.
Right. So that's early Pussy Riot songs.
That's amazing. I love that, by the way, it's grown into a collective, and like you were talking about with Dorian, with community building, because I remember when Pussy Riot first came out that everyone was like, well, who's in Pussy Riot? And what I found so intriguing, it's like, well, who isn't now? Like, what's so cool about it? I was like, it's inclusive in a really fascinating way. And that to me, like I was like, oh, that's so cool. I guess like, what did Dorian show you that kind of informed what you're doing now? And like, is that still the ethos of it now, where you're like, yep, it's like a snowball, just like join in?
Pussy Riot is like a snowball. It's like open source program. anyone can write their own code in it. And we have different departments. I don't know, like just like, you know, activists all around the world, they're taking initiative to create something, like literally something as Pussy Riot. And sometimes it's media projects, sometimes it's theatrical piece, music, what else? Prison reform initiative, pretty much everything. So yeah, who isn't in Pussy Riot? And even though I'm a co-founder of the movement, I have no right to say, oh, you're excluded from the movement. You are not part because I don't like what you do. So, you know, even if you are a dick to me, it's like you are allowed to be a dick to me. It still can be part of the whole thing. But, you know, because everyone is really advanced in ethics, in Pussy Riot, I feel like it's just attracting people who are nice. And it doesn't attract dicks and douches and assholes. So we never had actually problems with being like, oh, who gets to say what? Who gets to do what? It's just organically works.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone being like, you know what, I want to be a dick who's an activist. I hate people. I want to help them. I'm like, no, that doesn't usually. That's not usually how that goes.
Yeah, well, with rare exceptions, I can't think of a couple of people, but they are males, and yeah, I feel like when it comes to female activists and queer activists, it's like it's almost always they're fun and ethical and nice.
Yeah. I was gonna say there was. I was talking to a friend of mine of like he's a wonderful activist, but he doesn't list it on like any of his profiles, and like he's not very like public about it. Like a lot of his activism is like reporting on things and stuff like that. And I did point that out to him. I was like, it's actually kind of nice that you don't mention it very much. You just do the stuff. And as he aptly pointed out, he's like, yeah, no one really needs another like 20-something white dude to be out here being like, I'm an activist. He's like, yeah, I don't need accolades for it. Like, that just is creepy. He's like, usually that just would be really off-putting. I was like, yes, that's very true. That is very, very true.
This is really nice of him. That he he knows it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think like everyone should, you know, do whatever they feel like, but I totally respect this position. This sounds really great to me.
Yeah, I think this is pretty smart of him. He uses the fact that he's tall, he's white, he's like in his 20s to gain access to things because that's the kind of person that people give access to. So it's like he uses that in essence to be able to cover different things because he's like, I'm aware that if I didn't look the way I did, I probably wouldn't be able to get some of the stories that I do. But he's like, I'm not going to advertise that because then I wouldn't get those stories. I was like, oh, that's so true. It's like, I like that you're like a secret agent white dude.
Yeah, this is cool. This requires some planning in advance. I'm not really, I'm big on that skill. No, this is not, but unfortunately, no, I'm too in this moment, impulsive, I guess. I really follow my emotions when it comes to activism. I really trust them. I call it activist intuition. So it's really difficult for me to be subtle or plan in advance. I'm just loud.
Well, I think you need kind of like, I don't know, my friends and I were discussing particularly over the summer when there was so much activism going on in the States. And like now it's more kind of, I guess, like I would describe it as I was thinking about this yesterday. It's more incorporated into what I would describe as my daily life, where it's like there's a certain amount of my income that I save and spend every month on like the different nonprofits that I would like to donate to. I check different accounts to see like what action items I can do. Like, and it's just part of my routine now. but like we were talking about how you need like the different temperaments almost for activist work. Like you need someone who's going to like rush in impulsively like a tank, and then you need the person that's like helping you on Google Maps to tell you like where the cop cars are, and then you need the person that's here, like have some water bottles and money, and it's like you need kind of all of those to get it done, because it can't be all of one kind, like because your kind is needed so that way like we know where to go.
And this is incredibly important, work that you just mentioned. And I celebrate those people who are making this kind of work, and like, together, in accordance with each other, we will definitely achieve much bigger changes. Because like if everyone will just be loud and posting provocative videos on YouTube, we're not going to go far. But no. Organizational work, quiet work, like work in the shadow, like where nobody knows, it's so important. And I personally celebrate it even more because I get adrenaline rush from people liking my videos and being like, oh yeah, like she's so cool, but they don't. And I respect and value your work so much, guys, if you and girls, if you do it.
Yes and like, and those of us who are, I was like, I don't know if I'm more in the shadows. I guess I'm kind of in the middle. However, it's so funny. This can sound so like, oh my God, I'm a girl raised in LA. I was like, I'm not great in crowds. I just kind of freeze. My reaction at protests is I just kind of stand there and I'm just like, wait, what? What's going on? There's a lot going on. So I'm like, I'm kind of useless in that situation. I'm like, why would we make me do that? That's not how I'm best used. So I'm like, oh no, I'm way more of the sort that's like, who can I call and yell at? Like, who do I need to yell at on the phone? Where do I need to donate? Like, tell me those. What videos can I share so that people know what's going on? Because I love, like, when I was reading about particularly this video for Toxic, I'm like, I love when I get to share media like that, to be like, here's what's up. Here you go. Like, I love when stuff is out there. So that way, if I'm talking to someone about like, whether it's a client or a friend or another activist, whoever, that way I can be like, here's this amazing media. Here you go. Because it's more visceral than if you try and explain it to someone with words. Like that's, I think, at least like the power of activist art, is that it touches you in a visceral way that like an academic piece wouldn't.
I love to describe with words as well, though, too. I'm such a nerd. I'm such a nerd when it comes to describing my art. Because I spend some time making art, and then I spend approximately the same amount of time on describing it in details. So it's like pretty much nightmare to work with me on. Because I've been trying to work with a lot of people from entertainment industry, and it didn't work, not because they were bad or I was bad, but it's just like we're pretty different. And so I work with my publicist Inge Colson, with who we've been in touch since 2012, and because she's an activist, I think she just gets it. But some many people, like managers I was trying to work with and distributors, they're just like freaking out because like they get this Google Doc with 10 pages of of me describing in details my art and like all the details and meaning, and like here's like I refer to this, and they're like, fuck, like that's not what we asked you for. Like we asked you for just one sentence of being like, oh, I'm so happy with releasing this and this fun. Like I'm not like honest, it sounds like I'm making fun of those people who are saying like I'm happy with releasing my song. That's valid. I mean, like, yeah, if you want to say it, that's cool, but I'm not that person.
Right, you're like, I have a different vibe. Well, and also because your work is activism. That's the thing, is like, I like to share work like yours because for people, like, for instance, I love to read the 10-page explanation. As evident by like this entire podcast, I'm just like, please send me the 20-page annotated information. I'm
glad to hear that there is someone who wants to read it.
I was like, that's very me. I get really deeply nerdy about the things I like, but I know that like if I'm sharing it with someone who might like not be deeply nerdy about it, or like maybe not react to art in that way. I like to be able to share things that have like that emotive quality. So at the very least, I can capture their attention in that way. So that way, like once you kind of like get someone emotionally invested, then you can very slowly be like, would you like to see maybe like page 1 of my thesis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's like you got to get them in somehow, unless they're like us that would just happily be like, oh yeah, I'd love to read that.
Yeah, that's why I post what I post, and just taken after a conversation with Stoya, I posted on Twitter like a preview of our conversation, being like, yeah, go here, check out this 1 hour long conversation, which was like honestly pretty nerdy, but the quote I chose to attract people's attention is Stoya's phrase, would you like to ejaculate today? Would you like to ejaculate today? And they always say yes. So I just knew it's going to attract more eyeballs.
Oh, I love her. I literally, I got that book of her essays a while ago. I bought a whole bunch of books this last year because I love to read anyway. And I was just like, well, as long as I'm in my house, I have a great excuse to just read as much as I like, because sometimes I wouldn't read as much because I would feel guilty and be like, oh, I should go out and see this person. I should go do this thing. And I was like, I have an excuse to read all the books. So hers was one of them. And so, yeah, it's actually on my nightstand. And I just realized, like visualizing my nightstand, it's on top of the book Pleasure Activism, which I was like, oh, that's relevant.
That's awesome.
If you get the chance, I would highly recommend that book as well. It's also a collection of like essays and interviews, all about.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. But yeah, it centers around like our experience of our bodies, and that in a way, like that's been one of the main ways to oppress people, is to make pleasure this rarefied thing that we don't actually deserve and that is very tightly controlled. And so a lot of the book really goes into like that reclaiming our pleasure and reclaiming our experience of ourselves is actually extremely empowering.
This is extremely important. And I'm learning all my life how to get back pleasure, because I feel like maybe it's also a part of Russian culture as well. Like we are, well, at least when I was growing up, you were not supposed to rest, or we were supposed to basically just work, and then work. Maybe sometimes study occasionally and then work again. Because like I was just talking with my friend yesterday, and I remember that my stepdad quite dearly loved, he told me like, like there is no such thing as rest. Like you just change one work with another type of work, and that's how you rest. And the person I was talking to, he's from Argentina, and he was like, what? Like, I mean, like
he's like, are you
like, it's the opposite. I mean, at least he sees this the opposite. He's like, like our culture is more about pleasure, is more about rest, is more about like, human interaction and taking pleasure from it. I'm like, I don't know how accurate I am because I'm not from there, but at least that's what he told me. And Russians are just like, we have to be serious. We have to we love to suffer, or at least talk about our sufferings and problems. Yes. And they love to complain. So yeah, it was an interesting journey for me to learn how to find pleasure.
Yeah, like that's so funny that you say that in that particular way, because my family, like I've never actually been to Russia. My parents went to Russia, gosh, when was that? It was maybe like 15 years ago they visited Russia. But like lineage wise, my family does trace back to Russia. But I was raised here. And it's really funny because even within my family culture, and like my family, I was raised Jewish, like it was very similar in that like work and education were so emphasized that it's like, the very idea of like leisure time was kind of confusing. Like,
oh yeah,
like time where you don't do things. Like I was really unclear on the concept for a long time. And like similarly, where it's like when you're in your quote relaxing time, that's when you do like the work and the projects that you weren't doing during the other time.
Yes.
Like, so when people are like, well, didn't you just like relax or something? And it's like, I've had to have people kind of almost teach me like what that means.
Same, same.
I mean, we would go to things that were enjoyable. Like we would go to like museums and we would go see music. Like we would go to things, but there was kind of a purpose behind the things. Like it was like
Absolutely.
to learn
Yeah.
something.
Oh, don't even let me start on this. I'm struggling with this like up to this day. I just can't. It's almost impossible for me. It's just like it's not good motivation enough in my a system of values to go somewhere just because of I'll have fun. But I know with my brain that it will be good for me and it will be good for my work eventually. But because I was raised like with like value, I was raised with only one value: work. I just, it's really, really difficult to rewire myself.
Yeah, it's hard. Like one of my friends taught me, I kid you not, she taught me how to quote, take a relaxing bath. Because one time she said to me, she's just like, well, why don't you just like relax in the bath? And I was like, what? She's like, when you like sit in the bathtub and space out. And I was like, I don't, what? Like,
well, I listen to audiobooks.
Yeah, exactly. I was just, you want me to do what? Like, even as a kid, I remember I had like bath toys that I could play with. And like my dad would like hang out with me and we would talk the whole time, like, which was fascinating. My dad's a fascinating person. So I loved like that my dad was in charge of bath time because like we'd always just talk about interesting stuff, but it was never like unless like there were a few times that like my dad was supposed to be like giving me a bath and he like low-key fell asleep. Those were the only like quiet times where I was like, I'm just chilling. My poor dad, he was working full-time, and so like no shade on him for falling asleep. Like that's fine. I would have fallen asleep too if I were potty training and bathing a child after I'd been at work all day. But like those were the only times. And so the way she taught me was that like she made this really wonderful bath salt for me, but she's like, I'm going to fill it with an intention and I want you to think about this intention while you're sitting in the bath. So I was like, oh, that I can do. That's an assignment.
You're making progress.
Yeah. So I recommend.
I'm proud of you. It's not easy. Yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to a person who was my therapist at the time, and I was describing him my life, and he was like, okay, what about this? Make this thing. Just sit on a chair or wherever you want to sit and do nothing for an hour. Do nothing. And I couldn't. I couldn't.
An hour?
An fucking hour. I was like, can I meditate at least? He was like, no. What? You don't do anything. Like no goal. Just sit.
Oh my God. That I was like, I thought he was gonna say like 10 minutes. And I was like, ooh, that's tough. And then I was like, an hour?
Yeah.
Wow, that's like upper level doing nothing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they have the whole community and they meet each other, and he's part of this community, and meet each other and they do nothing for an hour sitting on chairs. It was undoable for me, but now as I'm talking about this, it sounds actually as an interesting challenge, because if I was able to survive 2 years in jail, it means that I probably can survive 1 hour of doing nothing sitting on a chair.
Yes. I was like, you've already run the marathon there. I was like, now this is just going to be more like a walk around the block.
I mean, it feels like, it seems like it, but it's not. It's not, it's like challenges, they do not, I don't know, they just don't make you a superhero. They don't. You never turn into a superhero unless you are an actor in a Hollywood movie.
That is very valuable for people to hear from fellow creatives, particularly, that there's no point at which you're like, I'm done. I've made it.
No,
there's no end point. You're like, ta-da!
No, I mean, unless you reached nirvana and yeah, I mean, like, maybe rarely, right? Like if you're a monk and you dedicate your life to this, maybe this is reachable, but I feel like for others it always will be, you know, like we've reached something then we lose it. I remember when I was in prison, I was actually scared. I clearly remember at some point when I would get to this I was having like revelations about things that we talk about right now, how to sit and do nothing, how to meditate, how to think really deeply about one thing and don't get distracted by anything, because prison is like a monastery in this sense. I mean, it's not like that in many other senses because it's a terrible place, but you don't have mobile phones and you don't have, like, sometimes you don't have even books to read, so you're just forced to be there and concentrate on your thoughts. So like I became really I was capable of really deep introspecting when I was in prison, and I remember I was able to build the whole palaces, the whole castles with my thoughts, and now I came back. Like now I'm a baby. I have attention deficit disorder. I mean, like I'm not diagnosed, but like as everyone else in our culture, we're, you know, predisposed to this because we're exposed to so many, you know, stressors. Instagram, Facebook, check my email. So yeah, I came back. Yeah, I was there. I was like almost like Buddha in prison, but no. I'm back.
That's a fascinating perspective because, yeah, like obviously prison is horrible in that like so much of your agency is taken away. But in another way, like you're describing, it's almost like regimented in a way that like there's nowhere else to turn but your thoughts.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's like, because I mean, there are people that essentially put themselves like in monasteries or go on retreats voluntarily that are like that. But of course, like that was not what you wanted. Like this was, yet again, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, where it's like if it's against your will, like what part of that is like you're like, oh, I'm resistant to it, but in another way it sounds like you kind of leaned into that, and I'm like, that's really powerful to be able to know that your mind can do that.
Well, to me it was a mechanism of self-protection, because I was just trying to find good sides and you know, interpret it, make an interpretation for myself, so it's not just negative. And I remember every day I would wake up and I would ask myself a question: how would I make this day meaningful to me? And because, you know, generally we tend to think about those times that people spent in jail as time that was taken away from them. And I knew about this, and I knew that my government probably has have the goal to make this terrible thing with me, to just, you know, steal my years of my life. And in the beginning I thought I'm going to be in jail up to 7 years, so it was like pretty long time. I was about to get released, so I ended up in jail when I was 22, and if I was about to spend 7 years, then I would be released when I was 29. And now I'm 31, so I was like trying to prepare myself for this, and I was just I made a promise to myself that I will make this time valuable. I will learn, first of all, about prison conditions as much as I can. So I would approach the whole thing as a scientist, making a case study. So I'm here for a reason. So this is one thing. Another thing is work on your relationships with yourself, because this is a good place to do it, right? Because you're just sitting doing nothing. Then later, after I was convicted, it became much more difficult because I was moved to penal colony, which is basically a labor camp. And you have to work there. I was producing police uniforms, so like all my plan went to shit because it was impossible to focus on myself. It was just like fucking torture. So that part is not enjoyable at all. But the time when I had to just be in a cell with one another person, it was fine. I mean, it was like really not what I wanted, but it was okay.
What you said is so striking. Like, have you read Have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
I read parts of it, not the whole thing, but I'm familiar with what he says in the book.
Yeah, that it sounds like that's what you did, is that you chose to make the situation meaningful. And there's a part in the book where it's like, he even describes where it kind of like, for him at least, like went dark for a while, like in losing his meaning. And that sounds like in like the penal colony, that sounds very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are certain things that essentially will rob people of meaning, that like you don't even have the capacity at that point to like actually delve into yourself. And that actually sounds more harmful than just the isolation of being imprisoned. Like having not just like your agency and space and connection taken away, but then being forced to focus on something else. Like that sounds even worse, because then it's really hard to ascribe meaning to that.
There is no meaning. You just you create products for corrupted prison wardens to sell and get money for them and their families. That's the only one meaning. But then I was like, bitch, I have to find meaning here as well. So that's why I went on hunger strike, and I wrote this prison letter, a letter from my prison about conditions that I saw. Terrible labor conditions, no medicine, people being treated like, I don't know, with violence, like with really physical violence. And I posted this letter. I mean, not me, because I was in penal colony, but my friends posted this letter, and it went around the world, and it actually shook Russian prison system really hard. So they had to open a criminal case on my prison warden, and now he's under criminal investigation right now. Wow. He's facing a couple of years in jail himself. So, it's like, it's always like push and pull. Like sometimes you feel like, okay, there is no meaning here. Like nothing can be done. And then next day you wake up and you speak with your friend in jail, because you can make friends everywhere, right? So I have friends in jail. I enjoy them and their company. And, my friend would be like, no, like, you can fight them.
Well, and that's ingenious. I love that you're just like, all right, you tried to take my meaning away. I'm going to find a different one. I respect that so much. I'm just like, because I think people do, unless you're put in that situation, people sometimes are like, oh, well, what would I do if I were in that situation? And you don't know unless you're there. Like, I don't know how I would react to that situation. But I
you know what? After this experience, and after all these extreme highs and extreme lows that I experienced when I was in prison, I think I encountered like some sort of PTSD that people encounter after participating in wars, right? Because like I like, there should be a special name for it. I just didn't know it, but like everything is so so full of meaning. It feels yourself so heroic. Like you have, like, everything is just black and white. You are this hero of the light that fights with evil, and then you get out of there. You get out of prison. You get out of the the war of the conflict. And you end up in normal life, and you're just like, I don't really know how to deal with this anymore, because I'm not accustomed to it. Like, my emotions and my reactions are just so different. And I ended up being so depressed for a couple of years after I was released from jail, just because I wasn't accustomed to normal life. And even now, sometimes I just don't find, I'm definitely changed forever by my experience. So it made me a little bit unfit for normal life.
Yeah, well, when you take someone and put them in such an extreme situation, and especially you make that extreme situation last for years, that will, like, I'm very curious what will happen, particularly after this pandemic. Like what society will look like. In a way, it's like we've put people in extreme conditions for an amount of time. It's well beyond, I mean, humans usually can deal with a crisis for about 3 to 4 weeks is usually our capacity. And then we just kind of loop to weird, is like, I'm like, it's a clinical term. It's like, we just go to a weird place. And so that's true. Cause then like when you come back, And in a way, it's like when you come back from something like prison or from a war or something like that, that's such a heightened situation for so long. And that's not how things usually are. Of course, you're going to be reacting differently. And like, that's why I'm curious what people are going to do after this. Like, we've been in a very heightened situation for about a year now in varying degrees. And I'm like, how will people react when danger has decreased? Like, I don't think we can stay at this danger level forever. I don't think that's feasible given the history of how pandemics work. But it's like, yeah, it's that feeling where afterwards, like, people think that once you quote get out, that you're like elated and you want to engage with things. But if anything, sometimes we have the converse reaction that you're like, well, what happens now? I spent so much energy on this and now this thing has like vanished. Like, what? I'm disbanded. Like
100%. And now you made me think that maybe because of my prison experience, sometimes finding myself in this like really deeply troubling feeling of that I'm afraid of the end of pandemic, because I already experienced something like that, right? So like I'll have to adjust to normal life again.
Like again?
Like again? Because I'm thinking like, okay, I was like more than a year ago, I knew how to interact with a lot of people. I knew how to tour, and now like I'm supposed to be happy that it's all coming back after everyone will be vaccinated, but it makes me anxious for whatever reason.
Like, I've been talking to people about this, that like, I feel very grateful that as a mental health care worker, like I'm vaccinated. And obviously when I do on rare occasion, I just realized I was like, I haven't even left my house since last Friday. I need to run errands after this. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to leave the house. But like, an event. But like, even when I go out, obviously it's like, I still wear my mask. I maintain distance. I'm not inside with people. I'm like, I actually sometimes take great comfort in not leaving. Not in that I think the outside world is scary part, but I like not having the pressure to do things that I don't want to. And I'm like, well, I guess this is going to come with a lot of good and a lot of weird.
Yeah, well, ultimately, just we got to do our best to cherish our mental health, so we will be able to meet every new situation with lots of strengths. Yes.
Oh, I was like, that's the perfect note to end on. I was like, what wisdom would you impart? I was like, there it is. You imparted the wisdom. Oh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate how generous you've been with your time.
Of course, it was incredibly interesting to talk to you, and
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.